Hi guys, this is Alex from Mason Lifestyle. I hope you guys are doing well and you had a great week and we had the most amazing weather. So let's see if we can keep it up for this long weekend. But today I wanted to show you a sew along from McCall's 7360, and this is a Henley top with a button down placket. And I'm actually going to make it in this dress because I have the most amazing fabric. This is a Japanese linen blend from Modes for You. And guys, I did not know about them, but wow, have I been missing out. So Modes for You, it's a fabric company located in Singapore. They are owned by a husband and wife team, and they have the most amazing fabrics online. If you like Japanese fabrics, they have it. They also have some of the usual suspects like Robert Kaufman, cotton and steel, but they also have fabrics with Hello Kitty, they have squishies, they have stationery, they have so many things. I could probably spend, I would say, like a good hour, and I'm not joking, I'm not kidding about that, on their website and just shopping away. They have some great pricing, so Liberty Fabrics, you guys should check that out because they carry those too. But one of the things that I love about them, because if you guys check me on Instagram, I'm always running out of thread. But guys, they match your thread for you, and they do this. A human being actually does this for you. It's not a computer. A wonderful human being gets all the thread out and pulls out your fabric and matches your thread. And they do this complimentary. So I definitely think you guys should check it out. They are the sponsor for today's sew along. I went ahead and put links to the fabric below and also their website, and I want to make sure that I am full disclosure, they are affiliated links. What does that mean? If you make a purchase, I make a small commission at no cost to you. All right, guys, let's get it started. So today I'm working on McCall's 7360, and I'm actually doing view D, which is the long tunic with pockets and also cuffs. And I'm gonna see if I add the tab. I'm still kind of on the fence on that, but I'll cut the fabric for that. So let me tell you about the pieces you're going to need. And when you look at the pieces, you will see that I have made adjustments to some of them. So, and I put all of those adjustments on my blog. So let me tell you what we are going to need. You're going to need pattern piece number 1, and I have this on the wrong side, but you're going to need pattern piece number 1, and this is the front, and you're going to cut 1 on the fold. You're also going to need pattern piece number 2, and you're going to cut 2. And I am not doing the tabs for these, just the pocket. I suspect that I am going to, once I fold it, that I will put a button on that just to keep the pockets closed. You're also going to need pattern piece number 4. This is the front band, and you're going to cut 2 of fabric and 2 of interfacing. You're also going to need pattern piece number 5, and this is the back, and you're going to cut 1 on the fold. You're also going to need pattern piece number 6, and this is the yoke, and you're going to cut 2 on the fold. You're also going to need pattern piece number 9, and this is the tab, and you're going to cut 2 of fabric and 2 of interfacing. You're also going to need pattern piece number 10, and this is one part of the sleeves. The sleeves are 2 parts, so you're going to cut 2. And then you're also going to need pattern piece number 11. This is the undersleeve, and you're going to cut 2. You're also going to need pattern piece number 12, and this is the cuff, and you're going to cut 2 of fabric and 2 of interfacing. And you are also going to need pattern piece number 13. This is the neckband, and you're going to cut 2 of fabric and 2 of interfacing, and today's sew along is sponsored by Modes for You. I have gone ahead and put a link in the comment box below, and also I have a link to the fabric on my blog. You guys should really go check it out. I really like this company. So, all right guys, go ahead and mark your notches, put your dots, any little things that you need to add to your fabric pieces, and let's get started. All right, so first things first, the pattern wants us to go ahead and sew our darts. And what I do, I just transfer my dots and just grab my ruler and draw my darts. It's just also easier too when I'm sewing. I know which way I'm going. So go ahead and pin your darts. So go ahead and pin your darts. And again, I want you to stitch from your widest point to your to the end. And I want to make sure that you back stitch at the start, but that you leave your threads long and you tie those by hand at the end. So go ahead and sew your darts. Again, start at the widest point. Make sure you back stitch there because you want to lock those in, but I want you to leave your threads long towards the end, which is pointing towards the bust. Leave your threads long, and I want you to tie those at the end. Tie them by hand. No back stitching there. You're going to have funky looking darts. And then once you do that, I want you to press your dart down. So go ahead and do that for both darts. So I went ahead and did my darts, and I went ahead also and pressed them down. So now that that's done, this is how they look from the front. Now that I got that done, I'm going to put this off to the side, and you're going to grab piece number 2, and these are your pockets. And usually what I do is I cut a pocket template piece without the seam allowance, which is 5/8 of an inch, right? So that's what I do, and I do this for all my pockets, and this makes sure that my pockets all look the same, that they're consistent, and that they look beautiful. So once I do that, so again, I cut a pocket template piece without the seam allowance. Then I grabbed my pockets and I went ahead and serged around them. And what I do is I go ahead and I do a long gathering stitch, and there are my threads. My threads are long. So I back stitch at the start, but I leave my threads long. And again, I use a long running stitch, and I do this at 3/8 of an inch. So then I grab my pocket piece and I do this towards the back because of course, right? So then I go ahead and pull on my threads. Pull on those threads. So I pull on the threads, and I usually do this by my iron. And I press, but what happens is once you pull on those gathers, it starts encircling your pocket, right? So again, I'm pulling on my threads. Pull my threads, and again, I do this by my iron because it's a little bit easier to do it on your iron. But once I have it like this, I go ahead and I press to seal the edges in. So go ahead and do your pockets. And I also grab the full line and I press it when I'm at the sewing machine because now we're going to go ahead and stitch our pockets. So go ahead and do a pocket template. And guys, I created an entire separate video for this, and it's been on the YouTube channel for quite some time. So I'm going to go ahead and link it above. So go ahead and do both of your pockets. Go ahead and do that now. All right, guys, now that I got my pockets done, right? And I also went ahead and while I was at the pressing station, I went ahead and also folded that top piece, and I also added a small piece of interfacing because I mentioned that I wanted to put a buttonhole, and I usually do that towards the end, or you can do it at this time. But now I want you to go ahead and top stitch right where you fold it, right at the fold line. So go ahead and do that now for both pockets. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so I went ahead and did top stitching on my pocket, right? And now it's time to go ahead and put these on the front piece. And the pattern gives you a placement line. This is for the tab, but this right here is where you would set your pockets. Now keep in mind, I lowered my bust dart about 1.5 inches, 2 inches, right? So I want to make sure that I take that in mind when I set my pockets. And I put little marks right there. So you can always set your pockets right when the pattern tells you, or you can always wait till you have your shirt or your dress almost done, and then you can go from there. So once you have set your pockets, I want you to go ahead and edge stitch around the edge. So go ahead and set in your pockets. Go ahead and do that now, guys. So I went ahead and stitched in my pockets. I'm happy with that. So now the pattern is asking us to go ahead and reinforce down in this area, since we're going to slash. Also, in other words, cut down the middle and also at a diagonal. What do I mean by that? So you have your front pattern piece and you have this line right here and you have this circle. So if you cut your pattern piece on the fold, which I know you did, you are going to reinforce down here. So down probably about like 1.5 inches, pivot, keep going straight and then pivot again. And then you are going to cut down the middle, right? I would say about like 1/2 inch, stop. And then you're going to cut at an angle. So I'm gonna go ahead and reinforce right here. And I don't know if you can see it, but I went ahead and drew where do I have to reinforce. And then I'm gonna show you where we're gonna cut. But go ahead and reinforce this area right now. So I went ahead and reinforced, and I'm gonna put it really close to the camera. You see it right there. So I reinforced, and if you're paying attention, I also drew 2 diagonal lines about 1/2 inch away from the reinforcement, and I also drew the line straight down the middle, okay? So now I'm just gonna grab my scissors and cut. Making sure I'm just cutting this, nothing else on my dress. So again, you get to the corners. One corner. And make sure that you do not go through your stitching line. So you see this right there. I went ahead and cut and slashed. So go ahead and do that now for your front bodice piece. Go ahead and do that now. All right, now I want you to grab piece number 4, and I want you to, and these are the interface pieces. I want to make sure that you go to your iron and press this 1/2 inch. So grab your seam gauge and measure 1/2 inch and press it in, right? Towards the interface part. And then you have notches here, and then you have notches at the front. So I want to make sure that you match those. And Make sure you pin those. Pin. So I went ahead and pinned right from that dot. So I want you to stitch from that dot. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and all the way to the end. And I want you to do this for the other side. Same thing, match your notch. And I want you to stitch this 1/2 inch. So 1/2 inch, seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and all the way to the end. Go ahead and do that now. So I went ahead and stitched those front bands. And now I want you to go ahead and press these towards the inside. Okay? I want you to press and also press, right? And then once you have pressed them towards the inside, I want you to fold them in. Okay, so go ahead and do that now for both front bands. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so let me explain you what I did with my front 2 bands. So I went ahead and folded them. Let me show you from the back. I went ahead and folded them in. And that seam allowance, I pressed it towards the band. And then I folded it again. And the pattern is asking you to slip stitch these in. Guys, I am actually just going to go ahead and top stitch these, right? And I'm gonna end right there on both sides. Once I do that, you should baste at the top, okay? And you wanna make sure that the left band is on top of the right. So go ahead and you can slip stitch by hand, or you can do what I'm gonna do. I'm going to just very neatly stop stitch. So go ahead and do that now. So I went ahead and top stitch my bands, right? They go all the way down to that little dot on both sides. Here's how they look from the back. And again, make sure that the left is on top of the right. And this is optional, but I think it's a really nice detail for you to do, is to make sure that you top stitch right at the bottom. I actually think that you should do that. The pattern's also asking you to cut this piece and just press it down, but I believe what I'm gonna do is just stitch around just so it's fully reinforced. All right, so make sure that you also top stitch down here. And if you want to go ahead and reinforce this area, you can also do that. But we're going to keep moving. So I went ahead and top stitched down there. And let me show you. See, just top stitched. All right, so now that you got that done, I want you to put this off to the side. And I want you to grab your piece number 5. And this is the back. And you have some pleats on your pattern. I am not going to do pleats. I'm going to do gathers. So I'm going to do 2 rows of gathering stitches by the middle of my piece. Okay, so show you. So I'm going to do 2 rows of gathering stitches right in the middle, about 1.5 inches on both sides. And again, if you're going to do gathering stitches, it is the longest running stitch on your sewing machine, and leave your threads long so you can pull. If you were to do the pleats, right, make sure that you mark your pleat and that you pleat, right? So you create a pleat and then you baste. So go ahead and do that now. For piece number 5, again, I'm going to do gathers for this piece. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so I went ahead and did my 2 rows gathers, and now I want you to grab the yoke, right? And if you did the gathers, you're thinking, okay, well, how will I know that these pieces will match? So what I want you to do is I want you to pull on your gathers until the two ends meet, okay? So once you do that, I want you to pin. All right, guys, so we pin the yoke to the back, and I'm going to do the burrito method just because the way that the pattern asks you to do things is to slip stitch, which is needle and thread, and do it by hand, which is okay. If you like doing it that way, you can also do that. But I'm gonna do the burrito method. So I pin my yoke, and I pin that yoke right side to right side, right? And I want you to grab your other yoke, and I want you to pin wrong side to right side, okay? Trust me on this, and I'm gonna show you why. And you are going to be stitching all three of these layers together. All right, so this is the inside of my dress, right? And when we stitch that, that's what you'll see from the inside. And then this is the outside of my dress. And when we stitch that in, you'll see the yoke on the outside. All right, so go ahead and stitch all three of these. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so I went ahead and stitched my yokes in, both of them, right? And they'll look like that from the back of the yoke and then inside, right? Inside the dress. But now I also want you to trim the seam allowance. And I would say trim it down to like 1/4 of an inch. And then I want you to press this. Right? I want you to go ahead and there you press it. So go ahead and press your seam allowance towards the yoke, okay? Go ahead and do that now. All right, so I went ahead and pressed it, right? And you wanna make sure that you press it and that those shoulders are matching on both sides, okay? So now this interior yoke, I'm gonna put this down, okay? And I'm gonna flip this over. So again, my interior yoke is down. Now I want you to grab your front piece and I want you to match the shoulder seams. You have a notch there. And again, make sure that your interior yoke is down. Okay, again, make sure that your interior yoke is facing down. So go ahead and pin the shoulders now. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so I went ahead and stitched my shoulders, right? Stitch both my shoulders, and now I want you to go ahead and roll up your dress, and you see that interior yoke? It's down here. So I want you to stitch. I want you to grab this yoke, and again, I want to make sure that you're keeping all of this bottom portion out of the way because we don't want to stitch that. And I want you to yet again pin. And guys, you can do this by hand if you wanted to. I just choose not to do this today. Some days I do, believe it or not. Some days I'm just like, you know what? I could use some hand stitching. Some days I do, other days I don't. It's actually sometimes depends on whatever I'm making. If it's like a slippery fabric or something like that. So go ahead and pin your interior yoke to your shoulders, and I want you to stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end, and make sure that you are only stitching the shoulders, okay? Do not stitch this part in, onto your shoulders. So make sure that you are keeping this away. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so I went ahead and stitched my shoulders, right? So now you can pull your dress, right? So this is what it looks like. I haven't stitched the sides on this, but let me show you. So there's your interior yoke, right? And your shoulder seams are stitched in, and this is the back. So it's all stitched in. And go ahead and give it a good press. So that is the burrito method, right? So now give this a good press. All right, now that we gave this a really good press, I want you to stitch the side seams. So again, right sides together. And you have these dots on the side of the pattern. And I want you to stop right there. So go ahead and stitch both of your side seams. Go ahead and do that now. So I went ahead and stitched my side seams, I trimmed them, and I also pressed them open. Okay, now put that off to the side, and I want you to grab piece number 9, and these are your tabs. And I want you with right sides together. I want you to pin. And I want you to stitch. So I went ahead and stitched piece number 9, and these are the tabs for the sleeves. So if you can see, I stitched 5/8, I pivoted, I came all the way down, and I left this open. And now the pattern is asking you to trim the seam allowance and to turn this over and give it a good press. So go ahead and do that now for piece number 9. And these are the tabs for the sleeves. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so we finish our sleeve tabs, and usually I like to put this in the seam allowance for the 2-piece sleeve that we are going to do right now. The pattern has you attaching these to the upper sleeve pattern, piece number 10, but I'm going to attach these right where the seam allowance is at. It's just a nice little reinforcement because this will be used. They also ask you to put buttonholes, but right now they ask you to put buttonholes and go ahead and install your sleeve tabs, but I still don't know what buttons I want. So let's start with the sleeves. So put your tabs off to the side, and I want you to grab your upper sleeve. This is piece number 10, and I want you to go ahead and do 2 rows of gathering stitches. And again, leave your threads long only on piece number 10. This is the upper sleeve, okay? Once you have that, I want you to go ahead and pin, right? Go ahead and pin, and you have a notch right here, but that notch does not match. So go ahead and just put right sides together and match your raw edge. And go ahead and stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. So forget the back stitch at the start. And you're gonna stop right here at this dot. Once you stitch, you lock in your stitches, I want you to go ahead and press your seams open, and I want you to finish your raw edge. So go ahead and do that now for both sleeves, piece number 10 and 11. So I went ahead and stitched my sleeve and pressed my sleeve seam allowance open. I also finished my seam allowance, right? And then I also want you to, remember you stopped at that dot. I also want you, when you are pressing that seam allowance open, that you create a narrow hem. Then once you do that with your iron, I want you to stitch along the edge so you can make sure that you have that opening, okay? Once you do that, I want to make sure that you attach your sleeve tabs. And this is what I was talking about. I like to attach this right at that seam allowance. Just has a little bit more reinforcement than in just one layer of sleeve. You can do it in one layer of sleeve, but my fabric is a beautiful lightweight linen cotton blend, so I want to make sure that nothing happens to it. So I want you to attach your sleeve tabs right at that stitching line that you have for piece number 10. It gives you a location. I want you to attach your sleeve tab going up. Once you stitch 5/8, then I want you to turn it and stitch again 5/8. So again, your sleeve tab's going to be going up towards your shoulder when you stitch it first, and then I want you to press it going down, and then I want you to stitch again 5/8. Go ahead and do that for both of your sleeves. Go ahead and do that now. So I went ahead and attached my sleeve tab. That's what it looks like. I also created my narrow hem around that opening, right? And while I was there, I also went ahead and did gathering stitches around the cap of the sleeve because we are going to go ahead and set in our sleeves. But first, I want you to go ahead and pin your sleeve and stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end. And I also want you to finish your sleeve, and make sure that if you have to pull some of these gathering stitches, that you don't stitch your gathering stitches once you finish your sleeves. So go ahead and do that for both of your sleeves. All right, so we went ahead and did our sleeves and pressed them. And now I am going to go ahead and set in our sleeves. So you have 2 notches in your sleeve. 1 notch, that means the front. 2 notches, that means the back. So I'm going to put that in. And as always, you want to make sure that you match your seams. Always match those seams. So start there and put a pin. And again, you have 2 notches right there. Hold on a second. I have to pull some of my gathers because I went a little too far. All right, so I got 2 notches. That means the back. So you definitely want to pin right there. Then you have another notch here, which is the front. You'll pin right there. And you have 3 dots on your sleeve. I have 1 there. I don't know if you guys can see them. So that definitely means the top of the sleeve. So now we definitely want to ease this in. So that's why you want to pull on your gathers. All right, guys, now that you set in your sleeve, I want you to stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance all the way around. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end. Take your time. I've told you guys many times that setting the sleeves is usually not my favorite thing to do, and make sure that when you are setting your sleeve in the sewing machine that your feed dogs are towards the sleeve and not the other way around. Go ahead and set in your sleeves in the machine. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so we went ahead and set in our sleeves. And if you're asking yourself, what does a good sleeve look like? First of all, the seams under your arm match, right? Guys, you know I'm big on this. And also that you have no puckers, okay? If you have some puckers, just go ahead and unpick probably about an inch on both sides of that pucker, and then go ahead and ease your sleeve in. Once you're done, go ahead and finish your sleeve inside and press the seam towards the sleeve, okay? So we're gonna keep going. So now I want you to grab piece number 12, which are your cuffs. So you went ahead and pressed your sleeves 3/8 up. So now I want you to grab your tunic or your dress, and you have a couple of dots. I want you to pin right there, but look at my dot this side. Look at where it's going to be pinned, okay? And if you measure that, it's 5/8. So same thing on this side. Now I want you to pull on your gathers. You can pull and adjust before you pin, but sometimes this just seems easier. All right. Now I want you to stitch 5/8 of an inch. Don't forget this stitch. Don't forget the back stitch at the start, which is that dot, and all the way to the end, which is that other dot. All right. So I went ahead and stitched my cuff in, right? And you have some gathers there. So now I want you to go ahead and press that seam allowance towards the cuff. And I also want you to fold your cuff, okay? You can do in half, but I went ahead and pressed my cuff just a little bit more. Why? So the pattern wants you to also slip stitch your cuff in there. So for now, I want you to press just a little bit more, and I want you to stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance, and I want you to do it right there from here all the way to here. So again, from this spot, right, from that spot all the way here on both sides, because we are going to turn these cuffs. So again, other side, same thing, and see how I folded my cuff just a little bit more, probably like about an eighth, just because I want to make sure that when I top stitch these, because I'm going to do them in my sewing machine, because I do not want to slip stitch today. If you want to slip stitch, have at it. I'll show you where. But go ahead and stitch from that dot that you had all the way there. 5/8 of an inch back stitch at the start and at the end, and do that for both sets of cuffs. Go ahead and do that now. So I went ahead and stitched right there, and I want you to grab your scissors and just trim, right? Same on this side. And I also want you to trim this seam allowance right here. Just a little bit. Guys, and I usually like to do my cuffs. The pattern had you doing your cuffs before you set in your sleeves, but what if I want to adjust the length, right? Okay, so we have our cuffs. Now, Ooh, hold on. All right. Now I want you to turn it. Just poke your corners out. Okay. So now, see where my sleeve is at? I want you to give this a really good press. Okay, really good press. Now, we're gonna do this from this side, right? We're going to stitch in the ditch. So you're going to stitch right on that little crevice. And what that's gonna do is gonna catch your cuff from the inside. Okay, but first I want you to press all of this really good. Okay, and I want you to pin. But first give it a really good press because it's gonna help you a lot. Once you do that, I want you to stitch in the ditch. All right, go ahead and do that now for both of your cuffs. Go ahead and do that now. So this is stitch in the ditch. I am literally stitching that little crevice, and I am catching my cuff on the back. All right, so I went ahead and stitched in the ditch. That's what it looks like, right? You almost don't see it. And then this is what it looks like on the inside, right? So didn't have to slip stitch. Now that you got your cuffs done, you can do buttonholes right now, or you can wait till the end. I'm gonna wait till the end. But now I want you to stay stitch your neckline. So start on this spot, go all the way to the middle, start on this spot, go all the way to the middle. Don't go from one side all the way around. Go from one side all the way around, from the other side all the way around, and end at the back center. Go ahead and do that now for your neckline. So I went ahead and stay stitch my neckline, right? I'm gonna put that off to the side. And I am going to grab my uninterface neck color. This is piece, I believe this is piece 13. And they want you to press your seam allowance 5/8, and then that you trim it to 3/8. I went ahead and pressed it. And guys, I'm not gonna trim it for now because, hey, I'm gonna try to see if I can stay stitch this. So go ahead and press your seam allowance 5/8 and trim it to 3/8. In my case, I kept it as is. I did not trim it, okay? Once you do that, I want you to stitch, grab the one that is interfaced, okay? And they want you to put these two together and see it from the side. I want you to stitch 5/8, starting at that dot, right? Here's your pattern piece, that dot all the way around, okay? And I want you to stop at that dot. Once you do that, we're going to turn our color in, and you may have to trim and clip into your curves. So go ahead and stitch 5/8. Don't forget the back stitch at the start. Keep going and all the way to the end. Go ahead and do that now. All right, guys, so I went ahead and stitched. Now I want you to trim. And I also want you to go ahead and clip into your curves. Like that, and just keep going. Then I want you to turn this, okay? So clip into all of those curves. You have quite a few over there. Then I want you to turn this and give it a good press. Go ahead and do that now. All right, guys, so I went ahead and turned in my collar, right? And I want to make sure that you are attaching this to the outside and not the inside as it says in the pattern, okay? Big one. All right, so I want to make sure that you pin in your collar, okay? And that's my center, okay? And that you keep this area that we folded in free and clear, okay? So I want you to stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the start, back stitch at the start and all the way to the end. And guys, I want to make sure that you test your colors out, perhaps maybe baste it. My color, the pattern piece for the color for my size was too long. So I want to make sure that you test it out. And if how do you test it out? You're going to have a big gap of fabric. So I want to make sure that you test out your color. And if it's too long, go ahead and start pinning towards the center and work your way out. And then you're going to have to redraw these bumps at the end. So just a little cautionary tale with this collar. It's a little bit different from how we usually do neck bands. So, but go ahead and stitch. All right, we got our collar done. I want you to trim all of the seam allowance, okay? So just trim all of that seam allowance, and I'm gonna go slow because I wanna make sure I don't cut anything, right? So trim all of this, and then I want you to turn, right? Turn this in. That's the outside. This is the inside. Remember how I told you not to cut your seam allowance too much? Well, now you can go ahead and stitch in the ditch, or you can also slip stitch, whichever. So go ahead and do now. Go ahead and trim your seam allowance by the collar, and that collar was a lot of fun, and I'm being facetious. And once you do that, I want you to stitch in the ditch or slip stitch. Go ahead and do that now. All right, guys, so we went ahead and understitched our collar. Don't forget, now you have to get your buttonholes. Those go on the left-hand side. You also have buttonholes on your sleeve cuff, on your sleeve tab, and you also have your hem. So the pattern is also calling for a narrow hem, which is fold, fold, and then stitch. All right, guys, I hope you like the solo. All right, guys, I hope you liked this video. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them below. Of course, as always, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to check out Modes for You. I put all the information on my blog and in the comment box below. And I'm also went ahead and included any changes that I made to this pattern on the pattern pieces on my blog. So you definitely go to check that out. All right, I'll see you next time. Bye.